Morning, everyone. A very warm welcome and look forward to your active participation as we discuss De Beers' journey to achieve perfect delivery. Before we dive into the content of today's session, may I briefly mention Forest Nation's initiative to reforest Tanzania. Each of you can directly contribute to plant us 10 more trees by answering 2 poll questions that will appear during the session. Now then, moving to the topic, on time in full or OTIF has been a key concept for supply chain practitioners for ages. This term was starting to gain a lot of traction and profile by being talked about as delivering on customer experience before the pandemic and becoming one of the 5 C's that the supply chains professionals are being asked to deliver on. However, as we all know, the variables on both demand side and supply side, like dramatic volume changes on different product categories, ports closures, labor shortages, chip shortages, to name a few, have grown exponentially during the pandemic. All of these variables have made achieving perfect delivery quite a complex affair, and no wonder supply chain has become a boardroom topic. Achieving perfect delivery, i.e. delivering on customer experience, is probably the topmost expectation that the board has from supply chain leaders. To discuss that topic, I'm joined today by 2 great panelists, and let's get started with a brief introduction to each of them. James, if I may come to you first for a brief intro to your role, and that'll be a great start.
Sure. Hi, Vikram. Hi, everyone. My name is James Heath. I'm the Operations Director at De Beers Jewelers. So that's the retail arm of De Beers. And so I'm responsible for everything from merchandising, inventory, logistics, all the back of house operations.
Perfect. Thanks, James. And Kuldeep, if you can briefly describe your role.
Of course, thank you, Vikram, and good morning, everyone. I'm Kuldeep Thakur. I am Managing Director at InspireXT. I'm a supply chain professional, but 25 years in different roles in industry as well as in consulting, and working with James and his team at De Beers, transforming that. We'll talk about that later. Anyways, thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks, Kuldeep. James, if I can come to you first, I'm sure most people would have heard of De Beers as a brand. So can you tell us a little bit more about, what the business, what the scope is, and the changes that are taking place in your sector?
Sure. Yes, as people may be aware, De Beers has been around since 1888, but the retail business is only actually 20 years old now, which is longer than it might seem. But as with many businesses, the systems landscape has changed so much in the last 20 years. So keeping up with those changes, and then the rapid changes in clients' purchasing habits and the technology that goes with that has really kept us all on our toes and a scramble to keep up at times, I would think. Pre the last couple of years, we have a client base that travels extensively, and we need to be able to service those clients wherever they turn up in the world, New York, London, Hong Kong, and then be able to engage with them wherever, whether it's online, in store, and by whatever means. So being aware, the mission for us is really being aware of every interaction with that client anywhere in the world, and for it to seem seamless to them. That's really been the key. So that's been why we've been on the journey that we'll talk about a bit more.
Perfect. Oh, I didn't know that retail business is only, sort of 2 decades old. So quite a lot happening, as you said. So quite a task then to kind of predict where your customers might be and ensuring a seamless experience across the world. Wow.
Yeah,
that's definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it's the classic phrase. I remember saying it to my CEO a number of years ago. We didn't have a single source of truth for the client or for the product. So the 2 fundamentals of retail were the clients and product, and they were split in legacy systems in too many places. So in order to do that, we embarked on an enterprise-wide transformation of of the processes and the enabling technologies that will be required there. So we started with the website, as that was in the most need, but then quickly realized in order to make all of the changes that were required there, we needed to do a whole back of house transition on the supply chain systems in order to do that. And that's where I've been responsible. And that's where we engage with InspireXT to help us first scope out those requirements through the discovery stage, RFI, and then the final solution and the implementation.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, James. Yeah, Kuldeep, James touched on InspireXT there. So can you explain a little bit about what you guys do and your role at De Beers?
Yeah, absolutely. As sort of James just touched on, these boundaries between sort of customer and products, they kind of disappeared over the years, and I think it's now difficult as to call them as back office, front office. I think that more or less when the customer looks at it, it's they just want a product and service, and it doesn't really matter how it is done. And that's where actually InspireXT is coming along. We specialize in enterprise value chain, which is essentially right from how you sort of ideate a product and right up to fulfilling that and everything in between. And we try to bring those processes alongside modern cloud technology. We specialize in Oracle Supply Cloud. Working with James, as James alluded to, it's end-to-end solution architecture, the delivery, the development, the testing. And we don't really look at supply chain as a siloed specialized offering that we do. It's basically at the heart of everything that James is trying to do and De Beers is trying to do. So we sort of span across number of other functions and try to make sure that it's always trying to address the needs of those edge cases as well. And I think that's where a single view of the customer, single view of the product, cost consciousness, all those things. So that's kind of the key activity we do at InspireXT, and I'm really pleased how things have turned out to be, and very grateful for James for sharing his insights, because I think it's a great innovation that De Beers is delivering, and James is leading a major transformation. So thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Kuldeep. So definitely a lot of work on your side to make it all happen. So James, if I may come to you, then again, I think we kind of started touching on this. What does a perfect delivery mean to you, right? And how important is it to the C-suite at De Beers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an important question. It's not just relevant to sort of logistics, but the entire organization, from the product marketing through the supply chain. For us, the sort of perfect delivery would mean being able to describe our product information in near real time and clearly to the customer, so the customers know what they're looking to buy. And for us, that means the specific characteristics of each individual diamond in a piece. So not just down to the serial number of a piece, but the actual specific specificities of the components of the serial number. Then the other one is the promise. We always call it that. If anyone, whether they're in store, online, we make a promise to them about that buying channel, and we need to make sure that we can deliver to that promise the moment it's made. So that means that supply chain, our logistics teams, but also our stores and our store colleagues, because they're all part of that as well, are configured to deliver to that. And that's easy to say, but it's definitely not easy to deliver on the back end, that's for sure. So we've also, the other factors that you've got to take into account, it's got to be cost effective. We're global. We have lots of unique pieces that people want to see. So it's got to be cost effective and environmentally friendly about how we move things from A to B. So one of the things we've worked with the team, with Kuldeep's team on, is the physical product may take one route, but the various intercode transactions may involve many more steps. And really, for me, that's a key automation point of making the systems do the work and to take out those manual steps so that it's as seamless as possible for the store teams and ultimately the client, and as unlabor intensive as possible. And obviously, at the same time, you've got to make sure all your statutory requirements, you've calculated the correct duties and taxes at every stage, depending on that routing. So it certainly requires a lot of configurability and complexity in that piece.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? It's not just about logistics, right? I think a lot of people sort of think of that. I think it starts, as you say, right from the very first interaction in terms of product information, number of channels that you have, and then again, obviously a lot of optimization in terms of how it can flow, and all the trade compliance, the regulations as well, right? So there is definitely quite a lot there. And in terms of like C-suite, do you think they kind of get that concept, or who was sort of most not worried, but who kind of saw this as an opportunity to really capitalize on in terms of delivering better value to the customer within the C-suite?
I think absolutely. I think where they see it is almost different metrics sometimes to the ones we're living and breathing. But you're looking at your customer data. You're looking about how many customers are new, how many are repeating, what value they're repeating. Obviously, you've got your online statistics. About the more traditional website ones, how long they're waiting and the drop off, and that's related obviously clearly to supply chain. But the other ones are what some of the client ones that are driving it. Actually, the answers come down to other things around delivering on those promises. So they're absolutely focused on that. We want happy. If you're a business that uses Net Promoter, it's all around those scores and making sure those bad experiences are as few as possible and it's as seamless as possible. Which in the last 2 years, it's not been easy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think everything that could have sort of gone different, let's say from normal, right, in terms of demand supply has been there, right? So absolutely. Oh, thank you. Kuldeep, anything you would like to that in terms of meaning of perfect delivery, or any trend that you're seeing in terms of sort of C-suite really taking notice of that?
I think James did touch on most of them, but I think the theme around this whole connected experience is very prevalent, and I think we saw it in the last 18 months that once you kind of say to customers, you're going to do this, you have to actually over deliver on that. And how do you do that if let's say you say one thing as a promise and your systems and your processes are not actually configured to do that? I think that's the difficult part. And I think the simpler it looks on the surface, right, the harder it is underneath that. And that is really where the supply chain optimizations and the understanding of the end-to-end sort of supply chain configuration within an enterprise are quite important. And I think, we want more and more simplicity. I don't think we are at the end of the simplicity journey. So it is, that would mean that the pressure of the complexity is going more inward towards the supply chain leaders and the functional departments. So we want to make sure that, we are making promises that are deliverable. We're also not taking the path of least resistance in that. Of course, there are statutory obligations that need to be addressed. So, it is a whole gamut of things that is to be looked into, and it's reasonably complex in that.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? The simpler it needs to appear, the more streamlined you internally, or more more you need to come together across different departments, right? So, perfect. I think that's probably a good segue to sort of discuss challenges. Before I do that, if we can launch the first poll question as well, and we can obviously carry on the conversation. So James, if I come to you again, right? So in terms of like to achieve that perfect delivery, if we can delve a little deeper into the challenges that you face, right, or are still facing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of challenges that organizations, by no means unique to us, are from internal to external. And obviously, the unforeseen market events in the last couple of years where there's no reference model and you've just got to adapt and respond to that situation. And I can vividly remember when we were setting up the configurability of the system, sort of we had never closed a store other than, you know, resiting or closing a store permanently, and not closing a store, not having access to the inventory. I'm sure I would have said, no, that will never happen.
Yeah,
and then it happened. And we had no way of, you know, it took a lot of head scratching. How do we manage that? Because it's one of those what ifs that hadn't come up before. So that was a lesson in, you know, of a little bit of complacency maybe on myself. You know, what if might happen? Never giving them maximum flexibility in how you configure things. Whereas other times it's more like, you know, Brexit clearly gave us some uncertainty, where there were changes over time. Whilst we didn't know what they would be, at least we were, you know, prepared. But when it happened, we needed to be able to change our routing for both the flow of goods and the timing of that flow of goods. So the flexibility and the configurability was key to the supply chain, and being able to do that in order that you're delivering on those promises. You know, the promise can get longer. I think to a certain extent people understand that, but you need to promise. You need to tell them right up front. So if it's 4 days, not 2, that's fine, as long as they are always expecting 4 from the off, rather than you come back with delays wherever possible. So that's key. For us, a key challenge is our product model. You know, it's a very complex one because the diamond is everything. So we're tracking the individual, you know, diamonds within every product. So that's where, you know, having the relationship with Kuldeep and the team has been quite key recently, because they've got their heads around and have delivered for us on that. We've been able to spin up a couple of new proof of concepts recently, quickly, for some gaps we've found, which would have taken a lot longer with anyone else. So I think that continuity of partnership, when you've got this complex promise that you're trying to always deliver on, it's been really important. Because we're still, as Kuldeep mentioned, we're still moving fast. We're not there yet on simplifying things for the customers. You know, digital buying behaviors are still evolving, and I'm sure what we think they'll be in 12 months' time, they'll be in 3 months' time, and we don't know what they'll be in 18 months' time yet. So, you know, we've got to keep up with that. You know, a few years ago, it was just about knowing everything they bought. Now we want to know everything they've looked at. Well, you know, you can say that, but the integration required to deliver on some of those things is, you know, takes a lot of doing. So I think it'll keep us on our toes for some time yet. So they keep us busy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So I guess if I can summarize, right? So it's a lot more becoming about not just looking at the historical data and the patterns, but really anticipating, right? Anticipating what they might look at, and then kind of trying to translate that into what they actually might buy. So absolutely, as you say, right, that sounds simple, but obviously quite a task. And then as from a supply perspective, right, you know, a lot of things are changing. As you said, right, you're not even having access to your own inventory was something you never thought of. So how do you kind of continue to deliver on that promise, right? So cool. That's that's quite a handful of challenges there. Kuldeep, anything you would like to add?
No, I think that's well summarized.
Perfect.
I concur.
Yeah. So if I sort of switch gears a little bit and try to focus, you know, on the technology side of things, right? So when you were trying to kind of you know, look at how do you underpin all of this by some sort of a technology platform, what were the key principles, you know, that you were looking for before actually deciding on some sort of a technology platform?
Yeah, so obviously we're looking at that customer engagement and making their journey, as we keep saying, making it simple and easy. And as Kuldeep said, simple is hard with multiple technologies. And, you know, for example, you know, with our global business, you know, 24/7, you know, near 24/7 uptime, near real-time global inventory visibility on every piece. That alone is a challenge that needs to be there. So that's, you know, always the key question for us, is that can we deliver that? And that's not always the case by a by a long margin. And then from our internal stakeholders, so we talk about the client, but who's delivering to the client is the employees and the brand ambassadors, and they've got to have a good experience. We're expecting them to deliver a seamless luxury experience in the stores, so it's got to be easy for them, and we need to make it seamless and the tools intuitive for them. And it is, that isn't again with some of the legacy systems that we all have. That's not always the case. So that's really important for them to be able to deliver. They're on the front line, so we've got to have something that is very configurable. You've got that uptime, that real time, and seamless on the front end. And then making sure that the stakeholders get the right information to perform the task. So we need to measure ourselves on this service, these promises. So we need to make sure we've got, especially for fulfillment, dashboards, are we delivering on those services? And then providing actionable insights for others is, as you mentioned earlier, C-suite, not data for data's sake, but, actionable data, whether it's on clients and upcoming events for clients or other marketing initiatives or stock levels, any of those.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So I guess to summarize that, it's sort of 24/7, a platform that's there for you 24/7. I think that point around sort of whole employee experience, that's absolutely a key one. I think a lot of times you forget the cultural change that's required, right? So not just look at systems from a number crunching perspective, but how easy is to use, right? Because they're delivering on that experience. So they really want to be not going around and checking the stock, but really focusing on interacting with the customer, right? And then third point, I think, is a key one, right? Right information so that you can act on it, right? Absolutely agree. It's not data just for the sake of it, right? It's kind of actionable data, so that you can do something about it. Perfect. That's really well articulated. Kuldeep, coming to you. Anything kind of you would like to add to that in terms of either supply chain or other system side?
I think I think it's well covered from my perspective. I think when sort of going back a couple of years when we were looking at diverse sort of requirements and trying to look at a potential evolving architecture, because there's no real to be or end state nowadays, because it's evolving as the business is growing as well. I think a few principles that were set to us were, it has to be cloud, obviously, because I think we will probably touch on that later, but it also is that we're not limited to one system, right? So we have to make sure that it is working with rest of the ecosystem cohesively, and the data flows, the security, and those kind of things. And I think those, it's always good to see when some of those things are top down in an organization rather than bottoms up, because that way it makes it easy to execute and design processes around that. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess, so I guess sort of two key points you are touching there is, cloud, we'll go into a bit more detail around that. And then again, integration with other systems, right? Again, I think to James' point, it got to be seamless experience, right? From the availability of product information all the way to fulfillment. So that's absolutely key.
And maybe a supplementary just on with that sort of selection of the system, and then maybe it's the next stage of sort of jumping it, but is you need that discovery piece is really important, and having the people that are going to be helping you to deliver that system, spending time on the ground, which has not necessarily been literally physically possible in the last 12 months. Luckily, we started before that, to see the end users and what it is they're trying to achieve and what it is you're trying to simplify. So that when you're at that design stage and the architecture piece, everyone can visualize, and it doesn't just rely on the business people. I think that's really important to really see a seamless transition in that delivery of the system.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely a really, really key point, right? I think so often we end up designing systems without talking enough to the people who will use it. So yeah, I think they got to really see that as a value add rather than just something sort of thrown at them. Absolutely. Thanks, James, for that. Yeah, so we'll launch the second sort of poll question and carry on the conversation. So yeah, if you sort of go a little bit more into the cloud, right? We kind of touched on sort of legacy and cloud or modern applications. So how significant was that sort of principle, when you were going after this system selection process, James?
Well, maybe I'll let Kuldeep, can was part of our sort of selection, and part of that, so they're better qualified to answer than Neil and this one.
Sure, James. I can give it a first go, and then I'm sure I will look to your wisdom in the end, absolutely, like I always do. Okay, I think this is a as much a diverse question as it is a general question nowadays, I suppose, because as James very eloquently touched this whole customer experience side, this significance word is probably difficult to describe in one use case, but I'll give it a go in 3-4 use cases if that helps. So I think the speed really, we're talking about the pace at which the innovation is happening, and innovation is not just a one company issue or a software vendor issue. I think innovation is everywhere. So De Beers is innovating customer experience, for example, or like other companies. And I think to be able to sort of get a platform where you can do that faster innovation, you can try out quickly, you can succeed or fail quickly, at least to be able to move to the next step after that. I think that journey is becoming a lot more enabled and a lot more predictable by this. So therefore, I think cloud does have a role to play. There's already a number of organizations on this journey, right? They have been for a lot of years. Obviously, the understanding has evolved as to what cloud actually is, right? I mean, there are different ways to describe that. But when you're talking on the top end of the cloud, which is the applications-driven journeys, I think that there you're talking about touching people's lives and touching everything that they do, and being able to sort of pace your innovation, being able to try out those things, cloud does do quite nicely. I think we touched on the user experience. I think the modern applications are rewritten, such as Oracle. They're not the old on-prem applications put into a container and put on a cloud. No, so they're rewritten, they are web services enabled, they are able to interact with any other devices that you may have. So that is key, actually. And of course, it has to coexist. I think that we can't rip and replace 20 years of doing in a one big bang way. There are those programs that we always used to start, that let's just do 3 years program, and in the end will come a solution and we will all use that. I think those days are gone long ago. So it has to basically be able to modularly pick and choose and replace a functionality that. So some of those things are quite significant for businesses like De Beers, and De Beers is leading the pack in that sense, because you have Salesforce, you've got SAP, you've got on-prem individual applications, you've got supply chain in the middle. So being able to basically bring them all together is the key. I think it also means that you're able to then free up some of your resources from this sort of technical work, if you so to speak. All of that IT infrastructure is now taken care of by somebody. That doesn't mean that IT is not relevant anymore. If anything, I think IT's role is also getting a little bit more business-centric rather than just keeping the lights on. And I think they become quite a key kind of partners in that success that everybody is trying to have. And I think that's quite key to realize, and not simply say it's a cost-cutting mechanism. It really is not. I mean, that cost is a byproduct of it. I mean, how you configure it and all that. I think it's having that ability to utilize IT as a more business-centric partners, I think is a great opportunity. And I think you would agree, James, that IT typically tends to have quite a broad and deep knowledge of the business, as an overall entity within the business than individual functions sometimes. And I think that's to leverage that and use them in a right way is always a good enabler for businesses. And I think cloud enables that quite nicely, actually.
Yeah, I think that we don't know what's coming tomorrow, what we're going to need to add, whether it's virtual selling or what new, method of selling there's going to be, what's absolutely required next year. But being able to integrate that quickly is really key, and so that's what that brings. And as you say, yeah, the knowing how all the different touch points work across the business. Often the IT teams who are involved in that have that knowledge and need to have that knowledge more. So as you say, they've switched their emphasis from just making sure they all work and the month end happens to something completely different. It's making sure that the business connections are seamless and we can adapt to the changing requirements.
Yeah.
So I think that adaptability is key, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, a couple of other things, obviously, I think what we've seen now actually in the last few months, or let's say a few quarters, is security has always been the key, right? But it has never been more important actually in the context of the remote working and everything going to be operated wherever people are. And I think having a cloud system which is going to reassure you that you have the same enterprise grade security no matter where you start is reassuring. And I think reassuring not just for the business, but I think the other engagements that you have. So security and compliance definitely, I think, is on a top agenda. And the last but not least, I think there is a let's say level playing field, so to speak. It's generally speaking, when you have a cloud system nowadays, it doesn't really matter what shape, size, demography of a client you are. You are able to have the same experience, same logic applications at a price point which previously wasn't feasible. You had to wait to be a certain size of a company. And I think that actually I believe is, for us InspireXT, for example, being a startup and being there for 3 years, having the ability to try out few things ourselves would have been quite difficult before. So I think those are quite significant points I think that the marketplace is witnessing right now, and I think cloud is generally leading that.
Thanks, Kuldeep. Really appreciate it. I'm sure we can go on, it's a really fascinating story, James. Absolutely. So, just conscious of the time, we'll open it up for live Q&A. So while we wait for questions on the chat, I guess just to kind of look at some of the key points. Perfect delivery, I think, is a topic from a De Beers perspective, really critical to the C-suite, right? It's not just a logistics issue. It's really all the way, right from marketing to finance to compliance, right? It's really key. And I guess from a second key point is, it's not just about looking historically. It's really a lot more about anticipating, right? What they might want next with channels and so on. And the third point sort of is, the more seamless you as an organization are trying to make it, more work internally is there to bring different functions together and different systems together. And then from a technology perspective, absolutely the 24/7, the employee experience, the right data at the right time. And then I think, as Kuldeep touched on, sort of cloud as an enabler in terms of innovation, security, right? All the data sort of that becomes, and I think James, you said, right, you never know what might come next. So in that sense, sort of cloud is a key enabler to kind of make sure it's you can keep up with the pace of what's going on. Perfect. So let me just check the chat and look at a couple of questions that are coming along. Let's start with this one. It's from Michael. What were the biggest challenges you faced in implementing, and what things would you do differently? So it's got two questions in a way.
Challenges, as I say, that there are So many for us, the product piece is one of our biggest pieces. We are unlike, I always say a lot of systems are built for fashion, and that's, it's a reality because of the volume of that business in the world. And our product is more complex than that, and the customer requirements are a lot more complex when you've got upgrades and service and so on and so forth. So trying to combine those sort of physical pieces with the intangibles of a service element, and keep the source of the product and what's happened to it and the client's interactions and all of those in a place where you could actually get, as we touched on earlier, actionable insights out of it afterwards is really difficult. And we're a good way there on that. We haven't cracked every bit of it, because it's just so tricky, some of those pieces. You want to keep history of something that you've sold, and you want to know how you've changed it after you've sold it. Well, it doesn't exist. So what do I stick the record against? So there's some real challenges for us there that we've been working on, and that's certainly been one of the pieces that. And I guess the lesson learned on that would be more time up front on discovery, because there's so many nuances in that to unpack that are different in maybe in different things you're trying to do, where you can test and learn quickly. I think when you're doing a huge enterprise-wide, that's different to let's try and spin up a new site that does something smaller. So that's definitely one of the key ones.
Cool. So really, a lot more attributes, I guess, right? It's not just about the physical product. There is a lot of information that needs to go along, so that the customer feels confident that they're buying the right, right sort of product, right? It's
the long relationship with the client and the long, the lifetime guarantee of our product. So it's about, everything that's happened to that. I guess from, cars might have that, what you want to know, every component that's ever been changed. What's happened to that? It's effectively that sort of model.
There is definitely a lot more complexity than I ever appreciated, really. Because it's still a retailer type of an experience, but I guess you're thinking a lot longer term, right? Rather than kind of something getting consumed over 2 days and then not worrying about it. So it's really cool. Another one. Who are the main, or what are the main KPI improvements you have seen, and any dollar value you can associate or share on this forum? I guess probably be confidential.
Yeah, I think you can say it transformed the system that we implemented with the global visibility of stock. And being able to promise. It's the old thing that I used to dream that you'd be able to do, sell anything from anywhere. Well, being able to sell anything from anywhere, is going to increase your sales, both in store but particularly online. Because if you've got a small inventory pool, you can either keep that really heavy, and that's quite expensive to have a big pool dedicated to e-commerce, or you can leverage everything you have. And as long as you can promise that in a reasonable time, that's hugely efficient. So from return on investment, that's really efficient in terms of your stock turn, and your ability to leverage that stock. So even very important for us, we've got a lot of unique pieces, but for anyone, leveraging your inventory and not having to keep isolated pools is a key efficiency. I think
that's quite a good one, right? Because I think a lot of times, supply chain sort of guys or girls sort of, at times struggle to make a business case. This is quite a good one, right? You can, to go to the CFO or CEO and say, you can sell from anywhere, right? And dramatically grow your revenue, right? That's a very, very simple business case, right? As you said, there would be a lot of other benefits like cost, efficiency, and so on. But just that mere fact alone, right? That it just dramatically grows up your chances to increase the revenue. That's
absolutely, and it goes hand in hand with the service piece as well. Customers look online, they see it available, they want to come in and be able to buy that piece. How many times you've been into a store and it's got it online, you get there and they haven't got it? hopefully becoming less these days, but still the case a lot of the time, and you can't afford that. So.
Yeah, perfect. I see another sort of related question. So how did you build case for change? I think we touched on kind of how the case was built in a way. How did you go about it? Who kind of sponsored it?
I think it was relatively easy a few years ago because people could see it was all, the word was omni-channel at the time. I actually think it would be even easier now because of what we've all had to go through the last few years. I think the key would be the flexibility that it gives you, the configurability to adapt, and the service that you're able to then deliver to the clients. So if you're able to leverage the inventory, you're going to give more insights on the clients to service better and be able to market to them better and increase your sales, but be able to adapt. I think it's a very uncertain, volatile world, and you need to be able to do that. Whereas before it was more traditional. Okay, we need to be omnichannel. We need to be able to sell online, in store. Now we just need to be able to adapt to what we don't know yet, almost. So which is a harder sell, but there's enough key metrics in it now, I think, to deliver the business case. And if you've lived through the last year and a half, everyone has their stories. Every retailer, what they've had to do that they thought would have taken 3 years, they managed to do in 6 months. But this is, well, maybe you could do it in 6 weeks next time because you've got the right systems in place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really, again, I think as you said, probably started off as just trying to kind of meet just immediate demand to sell across multiple channels, but it has really become critical to the customer life cycle value, right, over the entire life cycle. So inventory or stock is, that's really a key one. I think, if people can articulate kind of the value of supply chain in that way, I think, that absolutely that can go a long way in terms of helping other professionals. I think you probably have to sort of room for 1 or 2 more questions. There is another one. So how painful or not was moving to an application that has a continuous update and release model? That's probably, I guess, more for you, Kuldeep.
Yeah, I can. I think this is probably aiming at the continuous innovation that is being delivered. I think it's a double-edged, 2 sides of a coin, if you will. I think we would like, as businesses, to have the facility, the capability that is continuously giving us the newer models, whether it is just incremental enhancements that happen to our chosen solution, or there are newer innovations, like maybe there is more relevance for digital assistant or machine learning or AI type applications. And I think these are the things that have become quite relevant of late in cloud delivery model. Oracle, for example, does continuous release every quarter. They have been well embedded in De Beers and other places as well. Of course, there are some, the other side of the coin is that you need to really be clear as to where the journeys are and which journey is going to have an impact and what our fallback options are, if at all there is a serious implications of that. Of course, the technology works. I mean, it's, if we configure the technology and we know these cycles, and one advantage is that because it's a cloud solution, you can't really customize, change it. There is nothing that can possibly go wrong on the code base that you used to suspect before. But you still have other, other parts of the ecosystem that need to work with it. And I think for De Beers, I would say once a quarter, we do still have to manage the downtime, which can range a few hours. In a 24/7 scenario, that is a consideration, but we also know that progressively that downtime is going to come down, or we will have to have a fallback options. But of course, it can be a pain if you just couldn't afford a downtime, for example. Other than that, I don't think, James, we have any other issues. We've gone through fair few cycles right now, but I'll let you add to that.
I think you're right. The downtime was our concern beforehand going into it, and I think we've just had to make some decisions and configure accordingly for those times. And under the sort of understanding they are getting quicker, all the time, and you want the incremental. You do want the incremental updates. From the business side, I can say that I've not, other than being aware of that, it's been well managed, by the team, and so from the business side, we haven't felt the impact. So, but it was, I'll be honest, a good question, because it was upfront a concern on that. But I think the benefits far outweigh that. As long as you're aware and you go into that with the eyes wide open, and your business can adapt to those points.
Yeah. No, perfect. Yeah, again, I think it's obviously kind of quite a new concept, and even though in terms of like updates, as you said, Kuldeep, right, the code is okay, but I guess still you kind of do it in your own environment, right? You won't kind of gain the confidence. And James, absolutely right. As long as you know and plan around those downtimes and so on, then basically that then you're good, right? It's not an unexpected surprise. So just conscious of the time, we'll just take one related question. And again, if you have any further questions later on, do reach out to me, or and we can take those questions in due course. Maybe very briefly, I think Kuldeep, you mentioned a little bit, right? The environment being Salesforce, SAP, Oracle. I think for a lot of IT folks, their first reaction would be, oh no, it's like the SAP shop or Oracle shop. So how did you convince or the IT folks, if you will, right, that this is still the right way to move forward?
Well, I think I wouldn't take much credit for that. I think De Beers as a business is very progressive and very innovative. I think the business sees technology as an integral part of the business rather than it is a side show on IT. I think that I've been really impressed with ever since I and the team engaged. But of course, the key challenges are the challenges that we all have to come to terms with. And the major challenge is the coexistence is a reality. I mean, you just can't work around that. You couldn't do anything to a system that has been there for 20 years. You just couldn't begin to, and as James was alluding to, the product model is so deeply embedded in everything that De Beers does, at least on the DVJ side. So I think when pragmatic people get around the table and we look at the maturity of the systems, the ability to integrate and having the web services, but also having a good foresight about how this architecture is going to evolve, not just supply chain, but overall architecture. Because what is underpinning it is that seamless, easy customer experience. We have to meet those tests first, and then we can fix the technology. So for I think Oracle supply chain, for example, sits right in the middle of all these other clouds and on-prem systems. There are umpteen number of interactions happening real time or otherwise, but that's all part of the design thinking and progressive business process that needs to be there. And I think that's a reality that we all have to face, and we just need to make sure that we are listening to the business, what they want to achieve, and not saying, it's too difficult to integrate, it can't work, we just need everything in one place, one system. I mean, those are all possibilities that can take forever to try to achieve. So we have to kind of, champion that democratization of technology as it were.
James, anything you would like to that?
No, I mean, the selection was for the best, best in class for what was needed. And you've got to take, it's a balance. You could go with one house and do one thing, but I think you won't then, there'll be too many compromises, certainly for us, I think. So therefore, and you've got wider, what other business units that are using different systems that you need to work with as well. So you've got to balance those, and these days the systems have to work, with each other. It's not to say that that's necessarily easy. Spend quite a lot of time on that integration between them, but it hasn't been. It gives you the maximum flexibility, I think. And that's you know, that's so important.
Perfect. So progressive and being business led, and then
Yeah, you can't. It's got to be the business saying that I want this to be driving that. If you're like, no, we're a Microsoft shop. That's all we do, guys.
Yes, absolutely.
That's going to be a limiting factor.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I think that's absolutely key, right? Have a business lens, be progressive. I think, as Kuldeep said, I think with the cloud and the whole sort of democratization, right? So you can kind of work together. No, Brenda, I'm sure we can go on. Really, James, really appreciate your time, to share some wonderful insights. Kuldeep, thanks to you as well, to kind of bring the cloud piece especially to life. And thanks to our participants. Really appreciate your, very active participation. Again, if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, or whatever is going to be the sort of email contact that you will be sent through. Thanks a lot, and look forward to speak in due course.
Thank you very much, James, and Vikram.
Have a good day, everyone.